Hey there, it's Dr. T with episode 3. Why are families hurting economically right now? It's a really, really key question. It's driving a lot of our politics. And it's linked to the globalization discussion we had in episode 2. And the world of work has changed dramatically since World War II, as we said. Big shift in terms of manufacturing jobs leaving the country, especially. And I like to think about this in terms of my own family situation. My dad's parents, my grandfather had an eighth grade education because he was coming of age during the Depression. His family had no money. Once you got to high school, you had to pay for books. There was no money to pay for books, so he left school and went to work. He eventually fought in Iwo Jima in World War II. He came back from the war and he worked for Ford Motor Company for his entire life, right through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. When he retired, he got a great paycheck. He was able to support his family. He had a good pension and he had health care benefits and Social Security that helped him take good care of himself and my grandmother for the rest of their lives as they lived into their 80s. That really shifted when those manufacturing jobs went away. So, as we said with globalization, the companies are no longer committed to any particular town or any particular workforce. They will go wherever they need to, where they feel they need to get the cheapest labor possible. So, we saw how companies moved south from the Midwest to avoid the good wages that union jobs paid. They moved out of the country for cheaper wages. They're willing to go wherever they need to get the wage structure that they're looking for. And so what happened was in about the 1970s, prior to the 1970s, it was very normal for there to be, ups and downs in the business cycle. And what would happen is workers would be laid off, to go back to the manufacturing of cars, which is what I'm most familiar with being a Detroit area person. You used to lay off part of your workforce and they might be laid off for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it took. And then once demand picked up again in the economy, you'd be brought back in. A layoff was not a permanent thing. Right in the 1970s, it became a permanent way to trim the workforce. We now talk about layoffs as you are gone. And so these jobs that people got laid off from paid really well and did not require a great deal of education. And those kinds of jobs got very difficult to find. About the same time, the 1970s, we get the birth of what we call the service sector economy. So these manufacturing jobs are replaced by jobs in retail, in food service, hospitality, those sorts of things. They pay a lot less. They often work their workers less than 40 hours a week, so you can't count on a full 40 hours of pay, and they usually have no benefits. They do not provide what we call a living wage. A living wage is a wage that would allow one person to work and support their whole family. So at this point, a lot of women who had been in these homes where men earned enough money to support the whole family felt pressure to move into the workforce. This is mostly white working class and middle class women because, to be honest, due to racial discrimination in hiring and wage practices, most families of color were not able to live on just one wage. Other long-term pressures that workers have been facing besides this shift in the kinds of work and jobs and pay that are available is that the minimum wage has stayed very low for a long period of time. Back in 1980, it was $3.35. It is now at the federal level $7.25, and it has not been raised since 2009. Now, if you do the math on that, full-time work before any taxes or any withholding for Social Security or anything like that puts you at the poverty level. You make just over $15,000, and that assumes you're working 40 hours a week for 52 weeks out of the year, which most people are not able to do. The other thing that is pressuring families is the rising cost of healthcare. As we said, these service sector jobs that have really dominated the economy in the last 40 to 50 years provide little to no health insurance, and healthcare costs continue to increase faster than inflation or wages. And so people are not just struggling, they are pissed. And they have worked really hard. They have done what our society tells them to do. Get a job, put in your hours, and you'll be able to live the American dream, support your family, have a home, maybe send your children to college. And people are not able to do those things. They can't keep their heads above water financially. They're juggling bills and they're looking at their future and seeing it getting worse rather than better. They are anticipating that their children are going to be worse off than they are economically in their futures, and that's the last thing that any parent wants to see. So we will talk more in future episodes about pressures on families because there are others besides economic ones, more about poverty, and more about healthcare. So stay tuned.